Well, today we want to welcome you to the very first start of something very special to Mary and I. We are calling it our Family Business Podcast because, let's face it, family is everybody's business. So today, Mary and I are here, and how you doing, Mary?
I'm doing good. How are you, Steve?
I'm great. We're supposed to be acting as though we're at home, just chatting, like so often we do. You had a recording last night that you showed me of when we were chatting about things that we usually chat about, because so much of what we do in our professional world as ministers and pastors, so much of it is reviewed, rehearsed.
Oh, yeah. We spent a lot of time talking about
at home.
it. Yeah.
And
I grabbed my phone and recorded it.
Yeah, you did.
So we'd have it. Yeah.
So we are preparing ourselves for some kind of environment like this, where we want it to be natural, organic, and us just talking about things here that maybe we can't talk about on Sundays.
That's right.
Because we're in a mixed company of crowd members in the church and we don't have enough time. And so that's what the Family Business Podcast is about. The little tagline there, because family is everybody's business, there's kind of a little thought provoker there, because some people in society want you to think that, hey, what happens in my family is our own personal business. Don't meddle.
Yeah.
And yet they're not happy when all of a sudden things get all jacked up in their business or their home, their family.
Yeah, that's true.
But what we've tried to do in our lives is just live our lives out loud, as they say. We put it out there for people to see how we adjust with our kids, how we work with our kids, and work with our marriage, how we go about living at home, but yet also working together. So family is everybody's business. It should be everybody's business, because if you keep it in private, sooner or later it's going to become somebody's business anyway, when you're having to go to them and say, oh my gosh, my kids are jacked up, or my husband's or wife, so on. It becomes everybody's business.
Right. And if we'd put as much effort into our families as we do our businesses, we'd probably like the outcome a whole lot more, which is what we're going to talk a lot about.
Yeah.
How to do that.
So that's where we're coming up with the whole Family Business Podcast. So you feeling good about this?
I am. We have a lot to share. We spend a lot of time talking, analyzing, dissecting the things that we have done, the things that we know we wanted to do, what God's Word says about family, and we've put a lot of it into practice. We don't just talk about it, we walk about it. And I just made that up right there. I just made that up. Right there on the spot.
My brain just was going somewhere
just
with that.
Walk about it. We do. I mean, we spend a lot of time sharing. We get asked constantly, the who, what, when, where, how of our family, because we have a unique situation with all four of our kids that are working with us in ministry that we never forced. We did not make them do this. This is not something we said, your life will be perfect if you work for us at the church. We didn't do that. Mm-hmm. And so we get asked, well, how did you get to where you are with your kids? And really, we've processed that along the way. It's been a daily work that we've just really looked at other people's lives and we said, well, we don't want that. And we do want that. And maybe that will work. And then, of course, with God leading us all the way in God's Word. And wisdom is a big word for you. Mm-hmm. You like to incorporate in every decision wisdom. Yeah. And that has been an anchor in our marriage, and it's been an anchor in parenting our kids. We will draw from other people's experiences, but we don't draw conclusions. We'll just analyze to be able to see where the fruit is, and then we back up and say, okay, where's wisdom here for Christopher? Mm-hmm. Where's wisdom here for Stephanie, Lauren, and Gabby? They're all different, and God has a different plan for all of them. So it's just kind of cool that we get to talk about it here. And
we get to talk about it from the family standpoint, but also, here's the unique thing, is from the ministry standpoint.
Yeah.
The fact that we've got young adult kids that we've been able to raise all these years, and now they're all in their 20s right now, is unique in itself, that they all love one another, care for one another, like you and I as parents, want to hang out with us, do the whole thing when we hang as a family. But then you add on top of it this other component of, man, you guys work together, and you work together not just in the same profession, but you work together in the same company, which just happens to be a church, which is ministry.
In the same building.
In the same building. We're working at this on a daily basis with our kids, which required us to do things early on that were pretty intentional. Yeah. And then some of them were just all God, because there's things that happened that only God was able to make happen as we abided by certain principles of wisdom that we played out. So part of this was intentional. A lot of it was just grace. It was just a good grace of God. But people also want to know that. How in the world do you guys do that? And all 4 of your kids are level-headed. They love God. They love each other. They love ministry. They love the people of the church. That's a big deal, because we've been in this our entire life.
We have.
And we've seen a lot of pastors' kids grow up that are now adults, that some of them don't even have a relationship with God, Mary.
No, I know.
And they surely don't love God's people. No. They don't love the church. Some of them rarely go to church as pastors' kids. And here we are. We're second generation in this. You may be third generation, but I'm second.
I thought you were third.
Well, my papa was not in ministry.
He was.
Yeah, he thought he was the Apostle Paul. But my father, first generation. I'm second generation.
I'm third.
You're third generation. So how in the world is this happening? And that's something, in the sense that, of course, you think of family business, you tie it into mafioso stuff. It's the family business. Ours just happens to be another another M word, which is the ministry.
Oh, my Lord, the mafia.
And the mafia ministry. No, the ministry. How do we work together, not just live together, but now how do we work together?
And can I just say that one of the things this podcast is going to do, we are not going to use Christianese. We're going to talk like we talk at home. We're not going to, my first thought when you say that is to say, well, if you'll just lead people into a relationship with Jesus, if you'll just lead your children, and your children will love what you love, and if you just exemplify the love of Christ and walk that out, and you love the church, they'll love the church too. Well, that's not always true. That's not every day. That's not true. There are times where. Did you like that noise? Did I scare you with my noise?
No, it's what I'm going to say. Go.
No, don't. I see it in your face.
I know you do.
I can see it in your face. No, but the truth is, it's not perfect science.
Yeah. So you're just going to talk raw.
Yeah.
Real.
That's why we're doing this.
So that means the studio here is going to have to hit the bleep button on occasion when you get riled up. Because sometimes what comes out of you... Yeah.
Well, I'm a Christian first, but I'm a human being. And sometimes...
No, you're a human being first, and then you're a Christian.
Okay. So I'm a Christian human.
You're a human Christian.
But I'm 53 now, so the filters are almost completely removed.
So it's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun, and we've lived a lot. We've seen a lot.
Yeah.
We've experienced a lot in our lives, and being raised in ministry is really prepared us in a lot of ways for the hard days.
Yep.
This
is going to be a lot of you and I. It's going to be a lot of Chris and I, and then you and Chris. It's going to be Stephanie and I, and Stephanie and you. Yeah. And then we'll get Lauren and Gabby all in here. And then we're going to also reach out to some friends of ours that serve alongside of us in the ministry that are actually, I call them friends. Thank God I can call our staff friends.
I know.
They're going to sit in here around the table, and we're going to hear from them about how they really interact with us as a family, because that's not easy either. When your pastor is the father of the other staff members that is on board, and they don't know how to always deal with them, and they, sometimes they think, wow, that staff, that kid of the pastor could be spoiled. They could be favored. They could be given privileges that the average person won't give them, or they're afraid to even deal with them because they don't want to get in trouble by, someone in the higher ups and in the family. And yet we've tried our best with all of them to recognize when we get here. First, if you're an Alessi, you need to lead by example, not by parking space, for sure, not by title or name. Yeah. And that means they have to work hard to gain the respect of the other staff members that are in leadership. And thankfully, over the years, the leadership here, our friends, our staff, have been so cordial along the way to help even get our young adult kids now, all of them, loving the environment here, not hating each other, not dreading going to work, but they love working together, and there's a beautiful respect that is going to look really super as we continue to do this together.
Yeah.
So, babe,
it's going to be good.
Here's what I'd like us to do today, since we've kind of given some introduction. First, I feel like we're supposed to pray, but I know that's not the case here.
Why? We can pray.
No, we got it.
In the name of Jesus. Here we go.
Here's what I'd like us to talk about today.
Okay.
Because not a lot of people understand or know our story, know where we came from.
True.
We didn't just get here in ministry because we went to college and because we got an education and we came over here and started our church and so forth. This even happens before there was any college experience for us.
Right.
You and I were raised in the ministry. And we said we're second and then third generation ministers.
Yep.
And so what did that look like for you growing up in the church?
You know, I remember my earliest memory of really having an encounter with the Lord was as a little girl when my grandfather would tell the story of being, his family was not saved. This is on my dad's side. His family was not saved, and he came from one of like 11 brothers. And he was walking home one day in the mountains of Georgia. I know this sounds made up, but it is not. It's the truth. And he heard out of one of the little houses, little church houses, like what we see when we go to Georgia, those the little church across the street, like that. And the windows were open, and he heard people praying and singing. And then he heard someone speaking in this language he'd never heard before. And so he just remembers as a little boy walking home in the dark that he walked over to that window and he peered in. And it was filled with white people, black people, probably no Hispanics.
Wow.
But they were worshiping, they were singing, and they were speaking in tongues. And I that was such a story that marked me of this, I want that too, even as a little girl, and how he got saved and he took it home and his family got saved and then he got in ministry. Then he had my father. My father was extremely talented in music. Like he was almost a prodigy musically, songwriter, incredible guitar player, just would blow your mind at how talented. He taught himself to play the piano. His mom and dad were both very gifted. My grandmother, his mom, did kids' crusades for years, and she did magic. And I just remember being so enamored, not only by the things that they could do in front of crowds, big crowds, little crowds. I just knew that I wanted to be able to make an impact with what Jesus did in my life. I wanted that same story. I wanted that I wanted that to be me too. And so all of my sisters, we all went the ministry way. We felt called into ministry very young. By the time I was 12, I knew what I wanted to do with my life. And I always, over the years, I would question that. Did I really know? Was I really that kid, or did I just think I was? Until Gabby, at around 12 years old, was one of the 4 of our children who, at 12, she knew.
Already knew.
She already knew, and I was like, that was me. I didn't do that. God did that. And I didn't do that in Gabby, neither did you. God did that.
Yeah.
So it was just a hunger that I had, that I wanted to be in full-time ministry from that time. I didn't know how it was going to happen. I didn't know how it would play out, but I knew that God had spoken to me somehow, some way.
And then you were raised on what they call the evangelistic field, which means you and your family
traveled.
Went from church to church.
Goodness. Yes.
You and your mom and sisters would sing, and Dad would preach.
So we would travel in the car during the day, going from state to state, city to city, and my mom and dad would teach us to sing in the car, and I'd take the high notes and the high harmony, and Martha would take the lead, and Marveline would take the low, and my mom and dad would sing, and we would just spend hours in the car learning to sing all of my dad's songs.
Yeah.
And then we'd get to a church, and you'd start on a Sunday morning, and you remember these days, and you'd have crusade. What they call crusade was like a revival, a revived night that lasted 2 weeks. Every night of the week. So yes, we were homeschooled, clearly, or we would be gone every summer, and we would go. And so I just knew really early on, being entrenched in that culture, being around church 99% of my life, really caused me to be even more hungry, because I saw what God could do. I just watched salvations as a little girl, people transformed by a relationship with God, by a moment in a crusade where my mom and dad were singing and preaching, and we were getting up and singing, and that was just, it really shaped us. It really, really did. So we spent the majority of our childhood doing that.
Yeah. And during that time, because you're in the church world, there was good, there was bad, there was ugly. It is what it is. No environment
perfect
of
situation.
ministry is perfect. And but you saw the good, You did.
Yeah.
And the good really outweighed all the bad and the ugly.
By far.
Because you had a love for the ministry as you got older.
I did.
So then you're in high school and you didn't just attend youth group. You guys were more, okay, we're going to lead.
We did. And I think our parents, and you've said this, which is what connected you and me together, we were raised with the same values about ministry and about church.
Yeah.
And it made our relationship so much easier. You did not marry a wife that you had to say, come on, just put your hair in a ponytail and let's get to church. Mm-hmm. We've got to be on time. You married someone that would, church was priority. I could not wait for Sundays to get up. And Saturdays, we even knew that Saturdays are when we started getting ready for church. We didn't wait until Sunday morning. We were both raised that Saturday is the preparation for Sunday. So that helped us be on the same page.
And our dads knew each other before you and I ever knew each other because they went to Bible school together.
Yeah. People don't know that, I don't think. It's
our
pretty
dads
cool.
were buds.
In Bible school.
And even up until the year your dad passed away, they still stayed in touch with each other. Strange bedfellows, no doubt about it, but they still stayed in touch with each other. But our relationship started again. Here you're raised as a evangelist daughter on the road. Before that even started, our fathers would connect at Bible school in Lakeland, Florida, the school I eventually went to later on and graduated from.
Right.
And the city that you and I both were born in. We were both
in the
born
same hospital
in Lakeland, Florida, a few years apart.
Just a few.
While our dads were at Southeastern at different stints along the way, and yet they knew each other.
Pursuing their ministry calling.
That's crazy.
It is, and they had us.
So my story's unique in that my grandfather, Papa Alessi, was here in America. They came over from Italy, and he's in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. He's a good Catholic. They go to Mass pretty much every day. He gets handed a tract, which is a story, a paper, a pamphlet that's a story of the salvation message of Christ. He reads it, feels convicted, gives his heart to the Lord, which makes me always go back and think about the one person. What a difference one man can make if you're just obedient and give somebody a lift up by a good word or a good Bible or something that introduces somebody to God. Because that man that did that for my grandfather is going to, in heaven to this day, he is going to receive a real crown of life because of all of those who have come to the Lord since my grandfather got saved. And then his 3 sons were in full-time ministry. And
that's
now
the coolest story
It
ever.
really is a great story.
It's the most amazing testimony.
I pray we never forget that, Mary.
Oh,
we never
Steve.
get so caught up in the success of today.
No.
And all the numbers and the crowds that we forget. It started with one-on-one, 2 men.
On the job.
On the job.
Not in church.
How important it is to be an inviter and get people to church on Sundays.
And the courage that it took that guy. We don't even know his name.
No.
But he had that track in his pocket. We'll never know his name. But he reached out and said, here, what evangelism? We don't need a microphone for that.
No, that's beautiful.
And then an entire generation.
Yeah,
we're here today because of that guy.
Yeah. Because then my grandfather got saved, and when he got saved, he wanted to make sure his sons and daughter were in church all the time. So in Brooklyn, they went to church on Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday, they'd go to the Spanish church, they'd go to Puerto Rican church, they would go to the Italian church and the black church. They were always in church, which then put a hunger for God in my dad's heart. He comes down to Miami, runs into my mom at a church, Evangel Christian, or Evangel Temple, I think it's called, up in North Miami. My mom came from a unique upbringing. Her father was a truck driver, was into construction. He was a heavy smoker, and he drank quite a bit. And but her mom was godly.
Yeah.
Odie Mae Grice. She was so godly. She was angelic. Passed away way too soon. My grandfather passed away, which, by the way, that's where I got my red hair from when I was younger. Was granddaddy, we called him, and he died in his 50s from emphysema. And then grandma passed in her 60s, way too early, grandmommy. And then my mom was raised pretty much for a love of God and the love of the things of God, because grandmommy would stay home first to take care of granddaddy. Granddaddy didn't want her going to church. And a lady, a minister in North Florida or South Alabama, came and picked up my mom and took her to church on Sundays.
And she recently told us this story. This was amazing. I know.
One person.
I know, one person. Yeah.
One pastor, lady, would pick my mom up, take her to church, and then one day my mom asked her mom to go. And they went to church together. And my mom, at that point, just developed a love for God and a love for the ministry because she saw that. And so she always saw herself as somebody who would be set aside for ministry. Then she runs into this Brooklyn, New York guy who comes down here, and, you know, he got a Southerner and a Northerner, and he was a WAP. And
you could say that.
Her family had a hard time with meeting him at first, but then they get married. They start a church right here in Miami. I was raised in the church as you were raised on the evangelistic field.
Yeah.
And in high school, you know, I knew my job was to be a youth leader, and I'd be the president of the CAs, the Christian Christ ambassadors was what they called it. And it was the youth group. And so I served, as you did growing up. So the point was that we were kind of forced at times to work in church, forced to serve. We never had the privilege of staying home.
Never.
Even when we were sick, burning with fever, our parents had us in church on the back row, somebody was babysitting us, but we were there.
Yes.
In the office. One day they left me in the office at the Chamber of Commerce in South Miami.
Really? I got left in the office.
You got left in the office?
We both were left in the office.
I was sick. They supposedly told an usher to keep an eye on me, and all of a sudden in the middle of the service, they started smelling smoke, and they ran in, and I had found a set of matches, and I lit the garbage can on fire. And
church kid stuff.
I'm telling you, that
That's
kept
what
us
church
excited.
Kids do.
But we were raised in that, and we served.
We did.
And we loved serving.
Right.
We learned to love God, which then allowed us to love God's people. Yeah. And then we did feel the call to ministry. So, Mary, as you and I are living at this season of our lives, it's not surprising to our parents that we would then have kids come alongside of us to want to serve alongside of us, because our parents sowed towards this.
They did.
We knew what it was then to take those same seeds and sow them again into the future.
That's right.
For our own kids, which then our kids, and this is where we're getting even more intentional, because we don't want this thing to stop at the third generation.
No.
We're going to see this thing continue. God is not a God of just limited by 3 generations.
That's right. Oh my gosh.
Okay, no, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that's not where it stops.
No, it doesn't.
It may be harder for the third generation, but that doesn't mean it's impossible for the third generation.
No.
We can see this thing happen, which means now we're more intentional today than ever to have conversation like this with our kids, have them dialogue with us when they're struggling with something that's going on in their life or in the ministry or their relationships. We're very hands-on, even though they're young adults, because we know now this seed that they have been given. The Bible says he gives seed to the sower. We got the seed to sow because we were part of the harvest of our parents' seeds. Our kids will have seed to sow because they are part of the harvest of our seed.
That's right.
And babe, our grandchildren will have the seed to sow because our kids are going to sow the right kind of seed. A farmer knows the only way to have a harvest is to go plant a seed. So we're planting seeds. It's not surprising.
No, but what I hope people are hearing when you say the way you're phrasing what you're saying, you're not saying, hopefully, and that's what we're working for. You are saying it very absolute. This will happen. And I think there's a lot of moms and dads out there, single moms, single dads. I hear it all the time. Well, I'm sowing the seeds and I want my kids to grow up and serve the Lord. So hopefully, you just X'd out the seed. Mm-hmm. You don't hope against your seed.
Yeah.
You speak over that seed. You stand firm knowing our parents didn't hope in anything but Jesus. We didn't have options. We were going to go to church. We were going to serve the Lord because it was the main thing and it was the best thing. And that wasn't a mistake. We weren't caught up in a very strict bubble of Christian church that we rebelled against. No, they exemplified what it was like to live for God and serve God, not just be a Christian, but serve God. There was no, and hopefully one day, they raised us with an absolute truth and an absolute faith. And that's in both of us. So I think even as you might be hearing us talk about some of the how-tos and the principles of how we've operated, we stand on a firm foundation of, if the Word of God is true and we know it is, we will sow the seed and we will reap this harvest. So what do? We protect the seed.
Yep.
We germinate the seed. We make sure that seed has the right environment for it to grow into the harvest that we will walk in.
Yep. I'm glad to hear you say that. So what we're going to continue to be talking about is on some of that intentionality, some of the things we've been able to do, things that we felt were important, things that we learned from others were important to do, the right kind of position to put our kids in, to keep ourselves in.
Yeah.
Because, you and I, we gotta keep this relationship together first and foremost.
That's right.
It can't be one thing on Sunday and another thing on Monday through Saturday, or the kids will get that image in their head, which is a reason why some of them will rebel over years, because they see that the parent they're just not on the same page and there's not this congruency that is going on. So it's important that you and I continue to work this out with each other. But then we're going to be talking on our family business podcast about how we were able to accomplish some things with our kids. Okay, before we're done with this, I want them to know something a little bit more personal about you.
Okay.
All right?
Uh-oh.
What is your favorite color?
Oh, I like all the colors. What do you think is my favorite color?
Don't ask me. I'm asking you. You never answer a question with a question.
Well,
that's a salesman approach.
I can. What is my favorite color? I don't even know. I like a lot of things.
Ask me.
What's your favorite color?
Blue.
That's not creative, honey.
That's perfect, though. It's
Blue,
a great color.
It's a boy color.
Okay, so
that's like me saying pink.
Hopefully, everybody can maybe share this podcast with people. And if they do so on social media some way, tell them to come listen to this thing. Maybe they can then put in that little share thing that they do, your favorite color, and hashtag it Mary Alessi's favorite color.
So then I need to give them my favorite color.
No, let them guess.
Let them guess?
Yeah. What do they think's your favorite color
Can I give them a hint?
Well, I know, yeah.
I don't have a hint.
Christopher's wedding?
Christopher's wedding. No.
Man, that was my favorite color on you.
Oh. But here we go again.
Okay, we got to go. Been
it
great.
Starts with an M.
Oh, magenta. Great talking with you. Hope you have enjoyed the launch of our family business
Here we
podcast.
Go.